So without any further ado, thank you for joining us here with Migrating to Modern IT with Mobile Device Management. And I'd love to bring to stage Kim Zupancic, our Senior Product Marketing Manager, and our Solutions Consultant, Chad Falatic. Thank you guys for joining us. How are you?
We are good and excited to be here. Hi, everyone.
Awesome.
More than
Well,
happy to give you guys a demo in a minute. Sorry, go ahead.
you're fine, Chad. Awesome. And we're excited to see it, Chad. It's going to be the demo of the year. We've stamped it. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you guys. Kim, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Danny. So to begin, let me introduce today's presentation sponsor, which is LogMeIn Resolve MDM. So if you're new to the solution, what sets Resolve MDM apart is definitely its flexibility, the ease of use, which we'll get to see in the demo that we have prepared, as well as the rich functionality that it provides. It's a solution that is designed specifically to make the mobile device management experience seamless. We know that it can be often complicated. So we have that top of mind with Resolve MDM. It's for IT professionals like yourself, so that you can get started with really minimal effort. Also important to know that it's very versatile in the sense that it can support a large spectrum of devices, but also operating system. So it's really this unified solution to manage all of your endpoints. So for those of you that are less familiar with MDM, this first segment is for you. I'll be providing you with a brief overview of what an MDM is all about. And Danny mentioned it in the intro, but if you have specific things in mind that you'd like to see in the demo today, definitely let us know using the Q&A section as we go, and we'd love to answer those throughout the session today. So why is an MDM important? So a modern MDM solution is really essential for securing and managing this diversity of devices that we now have to manage within our ecosystem, whether that is company-owned devices, BYOD devices, or even a mix. It really allows IT teams to enforce security policies, to deploy configurations remotely, and to be able to maintain that oversight from this centralized console. And some of the key advantages of an MDM solution is definitely the ability to ensure compliance with corporate policies and also industry regulations if you find yourself in an industry that is more highly regulated. It's also important to reduce security risks and also to prevent data breaches. So with an MDM, you can really ensure that all of your endpoints remain compliant with the functionality that it provides. And you'll also make sure that you provide a seamless or streamlined experience for the employees that are also ultimately using the devices, which is also super important. The experience for the IT team, but also a good experience for the end users of those devices. And of course, MDM offers many additional capabilities beyond just compliance and security, which we'll explore in more detail in the demo. But first, let's take a look at some of the challenges that organizations face when managing devices without a proper solution in place. So we know that integrating an MDM into your tech stack can be a game changer. It's definitely a solution that is well loved by our customers, and it can help resolve some of the common device management challenges that several face. So whether you're managing, again, company-owned devices, BYD, or a mix, there are definitely several pain points that we hear frequently from our own customers, and many of which I have listed here on this slide. So let me walk you through some of these. Top of mind, of course, lack of visibility. So not having up-to-date insights into devices or even like software versions across our ecosystem is one that we hear a lot. Security gaps. So devices and data, you might feel like they're exposed or at greater risks due to the weak enforcement of security policies, for an example. Limited control in general, so not being able to effectively manage and monitor your growing fleet across, maybe remote locations and offices. And lastly, again, going back to that point of compliance, ensuring that devices meet internal compliance requirements, we know can be very time consuming and difficult without proper automation in place. So whether you're considering implementing an MDM solution for the first time, or if you're evaluating maybe switching to a different solution, I want to leave you off on this slide with 3 key factors to keep in mind. the first is really think about the types of devices that you need to manage. And think about, does the solution support all of your endpoints and operating system? And maybe to another extreme, is it overkill? Are you paying for maybe too many features that you're necessarily taking advantage of? Ease of use is also a big one. How intuitive and easy is it for your team to get onboarded and get going? And also in terms of day-to-day operational efficiency. And lastly, the experience, how is the experience for your IT team and your end users? Mess end users deal with technical issues very frequently. Very frequently, are you facing challenges with lifecycle management? All things to keep in mind. So with that, I think we're in a good spot to go to our first poll question of the day. So we'd love to hear from you and your experience. So you'll see a first poll question take the screen. So we'd love to know how many device platforms your organization typically manages. So we'll leave you some time to answer that. All right. So we see some results coming in. So we'll give you just a couple minutes or a couple seconds, I should say, to get that going. All right, so I think we're in a good spot. So if we can close the poll. Perfect. So it looks like from my end, the most typical answer was 3 to 4 operating systems, which is very typical, and one that we hear frequently again from our customers. Most companies now have a mix of iOS, macOS, Android, etc. So definitely something that I was expecting to see. So if we move to the next slide, what can you expect in terms of functionality? So the backbone of MDM are these key features that you see highlighted here on the slide. So this includes policy enforcement, which I've mentioned, seamless app and content management. So think about the ability to push these applications remotely to devices, robust device and data security. This can be anything from disk encryption, strong passwords, to more robust restriction policies as well, restrictions and configurations, and also to be able to keep all of those devices in check with proper inventory tracking and monitoring. And of course, this is all wrapped in a layer of automation to really make it easy for you to manage on a day-to-day perspective. So all in all, MDM is a solution that is very efficient, secure, and one that you can also very easily tailor to your needs. And Chad is going to be walking us through a demo very shortly, but just to make sure that we are tailoring that experience to the areas of MDM that you're most interested in, we have a last poll to get to before we get into the live demo. All right, so which MDM capabilities are you most interested in? So we'll give you just a few more seconds again to submit your responses. So far, it looks like ensuring data protection and security, as well as managing application installations and updates, seem to be the most popular options. All right. So if we can maybe share the results. All right. Okay, well, with that, I think, Chad, we're in a good spot to hand it over to you for the demo. I think you saw the two most popular, options from the poll. So I'm sure you'll be able to get into that with the demo.
For sure, for sure. So, yeah, like Kim mentioned, there's a focus in this tool of making this as simple as possible. We might have to talk about some mildly complicated topics today, but we think that everything works best, when we try to break it down to the simplest parts of, what we're working with, right? So, of course, getting those apps on the devices, I see that's almost as important to you guys as, that sort of core thing, which is ensuring that data protection and security, right? And as we jump through all of this here, keep in mind that at the end of the day, what does an MDM actually do? Well, it's going to help you to standardize the behavior of your devices, right? We've got different hardware and software out in the field. Maybe you're in the situation, where you've already purchased hardware or software, and from there, you don't have a method to manage it quite yet. We're here to help with that, right? And we'll make it pretty darn easy. So to that first point about managing, let's talk about. I'm going to have to log back in here real quick. There we go. To that first point about handling device data security, I want to show you guys before we get into the nitty gritty of how all of this actually works. I want to show you guys some of what we actually get at the end of this. So one of the key things that really stood out to me too, before we even talk about the data security and everything, was the fact that most of you guys are working with multiple different platforms in your environment, right? So, Go to Resolve MDM is going to support Windows, Mac OS, Android, and iOS fully with a wide variety of features for each of those platforms. The majority of those features, are strongest on the actual mobile devices, right? That's why we call it mobile device management. So primarily Android and iOS. They can all be enrolled either in bulk or individually. And when they are enrolled, they look like this. They go into a list of all of our different devices, and then we can kind of engage with these devices to, do all sorts of different things. So let me jump into this Samsung to give you guys a starter example. So right away, we can see who we've assigned the device to, what software it's running, what hardware it's running, the last time that it checked in with us. This is going to be really important later, especially for maintaining that kind of security, posture that you guys were interested in. Is the device compliant or not? It's a really important question. We can see the storage space of the device, so we can know how much data is on there, right? And then we can even see kind of basic data security questions right away. Is the device rooted? Is it encrypted? All of that information is available right here through the kind of top level, part of the information, right? We also have the ability to see whether or not the device's passcode is set. So maybe we're not even sure if we have like base level security in place quite yet, right? What is base level security for a mobile device? Probably a passcode, and making sure that data is encrypted. We can know off the top of our head right here if this is something that's actually already set up on the devices, right? So we can also set all sorts of custom attributes. So we'll talk about that later. But if we need to, kind of keep additional notes on these devices, essentially we can do that directly here through the tool. And then we can gather even more information, right? For example, I can see the applications that are currently deployed on any given device. Do they have the right version of Acrobat? Do they have Acrobat installed at all? Are updates necessary for this? Who is managing these actual applications that are on these devices, right? All of that information is available directly through here. So we can see every package name that's installed on any given device. We can get even more detailed inventory information too if we need as well. What is the situation with each individual radio or MAC address that is in each of these devices, right? We can find that out. So if we're doing a security audit, we need specific information about what device is connected where. Now we finally have that information all consolidated. We have the ability to see even more detailed info about the password complexity. We can even see camera sensor information. We've even got the ability to just see, for example, what the current SIM card status of the device is, right? If there are any restrictions in place. All of that information made available directly through here. Pretty cool. So, on top of all of this too, we have the ability not only to gather data, but we have the ability to make kind of restorative changes to these devices, right? So let's say, we're in a scenario where, okay, someone has messed up. The, phone got left in the back of a taxi cab. It got dropped on the streets of a city, something like that. Maybe it's not a directly malicious action, but the device is out of the hands of the employee, and we're concerned about there being company-owned data, on this device. Well, through this menu, we have the ability to make immediate changes to these devices. I can come up here, I can click lock device, and in just a second, I can issue a lock command to this, right? So if it's unlocked, I click lock device, and then I send this out, in just a second, this device will lock, right? With whatever security policy it is that I've got set up and in place for it. Of course, I can take more drastic actions if I need. I can, reset the passcode. So maybe we do lock ourselves out. We can do that. Even if it's just as simple as somebody calls me on the phone, they say, I'm not sure where my device actually is, right? We can trigger a remote alarm sound through here or wipe the device remotely. So for some of you who might be familiar with Find My iPhone for iOS devices, a lot of this is going to sound kind of similar. But the nice thing is now it's being managed by a corporate-owned account instead of by one of, like a personal account that you guys can lose the credentials to, lose access to. All of this now is properly folded into sort of the way that your device is actually managed properly, right? So, there's no more worrying about losing credentials or losing any particular iCloud account, having a spreadsheet of 50 different ones. That's all accessible directly through here with the tool. So I'm going to jump up another level and go back to our device list. And I'm going to show you how it looks for an iOS device. So that point about simplicity and kind of making sure that, this is an easy to use tool. iOS presents itself in almost exactly the same way as, Android devices do. There's specific information, right? So like if we need to see who, is enrolled or what iCloud account they have, that's included in here too, right? But all of it is going to be in more or less the exact same place, right? If I do something like wipe the device, I've got some additional options that are iOS specific. We have a feature called return to service that makes getting the device back up and functional much easier. When we use lost mode, we can put a screen message on the screen now instead too. All of this though presents itself the same in the UI across platforms to make this easier to use for you guys. Another feature that I want to talk about too, which is important for data preservation, is location tracking. So, for example, we've got this iPhone device that is set to report back data relatively often in Mexico City here. So not only can I see where the device most recently reported in, I can also see the location of the device as it's moved around. Lovely Mexico City, one of the finest places on the planet. And, from there, we've also got the ability to handle its life cycle too. So we'll talk about that in more detail, right? And all of the kind of information that we mentioned previously. So you can get your location tracking data. You can make decisions about exactly, okay, well, has this device not reported in 48 hours? I'm going to issue the wipe command. So the next time it does come online, it is wiped. Maybe this device, is moving to an unexpected location. We can make a wipe or lock command based on that too. Maybe somebody far away, needs into a device. They forgot the passcode or locked themselves out. Now we can remotely solve that, directly through here. So my point is, we can take corrective actions to devices. We can learn about what they're doing all through this panel very, very easily, right? Okay, so that's some of kind of the individual device stuff. We also make it possible to sort and view all of your devices with any filter that you can imagine directly through here. So if you just want to find ones that haven't reported in recently, we're just a click away from seeing that information, right? If we just want to find iPhones, right, I can filter that out, hit enter, and in a second we've got all of them sorted. Really, really easy to find our devices, kind of narrow things down directly through here. So yeah, that's one part of it. So we can learn about our devices, we can take corrective actions, but what do we do to make sure that these devices don't ever behave in a way that has them store data that we don't want stored, or have a user misuse the device? Well, that's when we get into what we call configuration profiles. So this is another important kind of data and security management tool. I can make configurations for all of these different platforms. We'll start with iOS. That can do tons of different things for our tool. I have the ability to, turn on activation lock, right? Or rather disable this entirely if we need. So users can't lock us out of our device. I can block certain applications. I can force application updates to go through. I can create a, kiosk mode for the device. So the example I always give is if you've gone to a coffee shop and they have an iPad in a little container, and that iPad is being used to just check people out for their coffee. The way they're accomplishing that is probably with a kiosk mode configuration, because they don't want employees, using the iPad to stream YouTube videos all day. They want employees using the iPad to do their actual job. So they're creating a restrictions profile through here, right? We can pre-set up things like Wi-Fi, we can filter web content, we can even just standardize things as simple as a wallpaper to remind people that when they're using the device, they're using a company-owned device directly through here, right? So I want to show you a little bit more of how granular we can get with this. So for example, we have the ability to deny all sorts of hardware and software functionality even further than this. We can disable FaceTime, camera access altogether if we need. We can turn off iMessages so we don't have to worry about employees syncing their personal data onto company devices anymore. What about even Apple News or different Safari based level functionality for things that are more secure? So maybe we just want to disallow cookies entirely. What about Siri, right? What if we want to, prevent users from removing system apps or just even accessing YouTube on the device? That's all available directly through here. AirPrint, wireless radio stuff, right? Bluetooth, the ability to toggle. So like deny cellular plan modification. If I check this, for example, the user can't disable the cellular plan. They just have to leave it on. So that way we know that the device will continue to phone home as long as it's being used, right? As long as it's on. We can deny handoff. We can turn off in-app purchases. Really lock these devices down to just be about the core functionality that we need, right? And each time we redirect the user to doing only the work that they're supposed to be doing on these devices, we redirect the user to using the device in a more secure way that preserves and respects the data that's on that device, better, right? And we'll talk more too. I think some of this plays into the application updates and everything with that as well. And in application deployment more broadly as we go through here. But again, it can just be something as simple too as just forcing the Wi-Fi power on, so you don't get a call anymore from somebody going, my Wi-Fi, my iPad's not on the internet, and you go and you spend time with them and you realize they've just toggled the Wi-Fi off because they fat fingered it or did something, that they weren't intending to do on the device. You can just eliminate kind of those edge cases. All sorts of additional security and privacy functionality. We can get from kind of the mundane, so we would just want to prevent diagnostic data from going to Apple. We can do that. To things that are kind of more serious, right? In the event of like somebody making a bad faith attack on the device, right? So we can deny USB access, if we need, directly through here. Another important thing for data preservation. All sorts of kind of things. We can even prevent them from connecting to unknown, Wi-Fi SSIDs if we need, right? Same thing with iCloud functionality. This is really key for preserving your data security. Maybe you don't want end users, logging into their iCloud and syncing data off at all, right? Something I've seen all the time, for example, is companies have shared contact data or core contact data that they don't want, leaving with an employee when they leave the company. This is a way that you can prevent that data from being synced to their personal iCloud account, because once it's in their personal kind of vault, it's not something that we can touch anymore. Apple's, taking custodianship of it, and it's just really, really important to make sure that we lock all of that down, right? So, yeah, that's some of what we can do to kind of, lock down device functionality even more. I want to show you guys an example too, back to that point about how easy it is that we make it to do all of this. So you'll probably notice that all of this happens just through a step-by-step sort of core functionality. So maybe I'm setting up a passcode. Well, I click the passcode policy. I answer the questions. So do I want it to allow a simple value? We put a tooltip directly here telling you what it is. So like, do you want a passcode to be able to be 11111, right? You can allow that deliberately if you want. Do you want to require for people to use alphanumeric characters? Do you want to set a minimum length of the device? Not the device, the passcode. What about complex characters? How often do we want to have it expire, right? Another core thing of proper functionality. If you work in an environment where you have access to a Windows computer, right, it's probably true that every now and again your company makes you rotate credentials, right? Unfortunately, for a lot of environments, folks don't have to do that with their mobile devices. It's a huge security flaw. Now you can force users to, rotate their credentials. You can block them from setting the same ones. You can even actually have the device auto wipe if it encounters a certain number of failed attempts as well too. So same thing too, do you want it to be every minute, right, that they need the passcode? Just set that policy directly through here and make it so that way it's actually standardized how often, folks are in here as well. I'm going to take a little look at our questions real quick. We'll probably just see if there's anything immediately relevant. I'm going to hold off most of these to when we get to the end. Yeah. Okay. So, that's a little bit, just some additional words on kind of data security and how configurations work. All of this is, again, step by step by step, very easy to use. You finish configuring it, it goes into this list, and then deploying them out, like I've got one here that blocks YouTube, is as easy as choosing the devices to send it out to, clicking next, and then hitting deploy. There are methods that you can use to automate this too and create kind of a provisioning package. Um, it's very, very easy to get all of that set up. All right, let's talk about applications. Well, actually, no, I don't want to jump too far forward. Let's talk about Android a second too for configurations. You can see we have roughly equivalent settings for all of those same things, right? So maybe we want to do passcodes, restrictions, really lock the device down to only functioning again in that core way that we want it to. All of that is available directly through here. Let's see what we got. Yeah, same thing with Wi-Fi, system radios. I won't go over all of that again in detail, but just know that there's essentially feature parity between both. There are some differences because of how the manufacturers have built the operating systems, but we want to make sure that we're providing kind of a full package here for both sides of it. Okay, moving on to applications. So applications we can get on in a bunch of different ways, right? The best one, what we recommend is something called Volume Purchase Program for Apple. So, maybe drop like a thumbs up in chat if you've ever dealt with this or, something similar. Have you guys ever had to provide employees with a login so they can download apps on their environment, right? Or had issues with them using like a personal login in that environment, Okay, so I see a couple already, right? Really, really common scenario. You have to have a bunch of company-owned, like iCloud accounts, and that's necessary even for free apps because Google makes you require authentication. Even if you just want to go have them download Outlook, right? They need to log in, which puts them either in the scenario of merging their Outlook environment, not their Outlook environment, their iCloud environment with your device, or their Google Play environment with your device, right? Lets you have less ownership over your device, creates a bottleneck and another headache for you guys to have to deal with. So there are two types of infrastructure that we support that makes this better. One of them is called Apple Volume Purchase Program. Essentially, Apple allows you to specify one business style account for all of your devices. And then from then on, when users authenticate and try to download an app, it'll just authenticate with your business level account instead of having people handle it by hand, right? So we've got the ability to take an entire spreadsheet or the need for separate accounts and just have Apple authenticate with your business level account, right? This can also include if you do need paid software on the device, no more having to send users a reimbursement or having them purchase these things through a personal account that you're running for the company. Instead, you can bulk license them, distribute the licenses as you need. We sync all of that, and those apps go right into this list down here. There's also Managed Google Play. So Managed Google Play is the Android equivalent of this. So we can have one Google Play account for all of your infrastructure, and we have the ability to take that Managed Google Play infrastructure, hook it into here, and literally just see like a store, right? So this allows us to push dummy accounts to the end user devices that just let them get their apps if you want them to handle it. You can also lock down what it is they can even see. You can make the Google Play Store just the 20 apps that you want them to have access to, and you can also pre-deploy those apps as well if you need, right? So it's adding an app on Google Play is as easy as getting in here and what's an app that people use? I wanted to search something up, but I'm staring me in the face. Adobe Acrobat, for example. I click select, it goes into this list. I can choose any configurations that I want, and let's talk about that actually for a second. So not only can we push apps out, but we can also include payload configurations, right? So let's say we have Outlook on one of these devices. Maybe we want to make it so that way only they can log in with a certain account that you specify. That's something that we can include in here. So for example, for Acrobat Reader, Adobe has allowed a couple of different options. Maybe we want to set this Adobe Cloud Storage option. By default, it says it's set to false. Maybe I want to allow them to use their cloud storage, right? I check that off. Now this Boolean will be set to true. Do we want to allow them to use Google Drive? I can set that on or off here, right? This is one example of one application and the configurations that we can set up for this. Very, very powerful. We can choose as many different configs as we want. So I'll actually say no config and deploy this out to devices in just a second. So I click next, deploy, and then it'll just automatically log in with our, I can log it. It'll log in with our shared Google Play account, and then from there, uh, authenticate, send the application out, right? So no more intervening manually in that way. So really, really easy to get, these applications onto these devices, right? So you can see we state the place that it's from, what the application size is, the name of it, everything that's all listed directly in here. And I could easily deploy all of my apps or just a couple in a couple of clicks, right? So no more manually having to do that, right? All right, so we've talked about configurations, right? We've talked about how we can lock our devices down. We've talked about how we can get our apps out to these devices. But the next question I always get, right, is, well, how do I automate this, right? I don't want to click deploy on 50 different apps for all of my different devices, right? Well, I want to show you. So we use a tagging system. What does that mean? It means that it's really, really easy for us to create kind of different policies for different groups of folks on how the devices should be managed, right? So let's give you an example here. Something that I get all the time is, people will make different tablet configurations for truck drivers, right? You don't want a truck driver, watching Netflix most of the time, right? That's my professional opinion. I don't work in the industry, but that's what I believe and that's what I commonly hear. So, I can add a tag to this device for truck drivers, right? And then I can make what's called a business policy for that functionality, right? So I can either have something apply to everything in my environment, or I can narrow it down to certain tags. So we'll use just the folks that have this truck driver's tag here. And I can give it a name. You're never going to guess what I'm choosing. All right. So I click close, go into my policy, and then now I can add as many apps or configurations as I want. So maybe every truck driver needs Adobe Acrobat. Maybe they need the LogMeIn Resolve app. Maybe they need, Z Archiver, right? I can add all of these to this policy. Sorry, folks, I'm honestly a little under the weather, so if the audio experience isn't great, I appreciate your patience. But yeah, so I can add all of these into this policy here, and then have the device, immediately send those out. Same thing with the configurations, right? So maybe every truck driver device should block YouTube, should be in a kiosk mode. All of that's available directly through here. So I can add as many configurations and applications that I want. I've got multiple of the same type in here, and then that will go into this list. And once I click enable, any of the devices that have that tag will work to bring themselves into compliance. So no more, having to manually build these out. I can just say this is the configuration for the front desk. It has the sign-in app for our front desk, and it blocks everything else, and it rotates the passcode every 3 months. And then assign that tag to all of our front desk devices, and they'll just self-configure, right? So that brings me to my other point too, which is about enrollment. So we're actually able to automate enrollment a couple of different ways. We can use what's called Google Play Enterprise to make it so your devices will enroll as soon as they come out of the box, or Apple Device Enrollment Program to do the same too. So what does that mean? It means you can take your iPad or your Samsung device or your Google device, literally take it out of the box, turn it on, connect it to Wi-Fi, or if it's already got cellular, you don't even have to do that. And then the device will self-configure with all of your policies in place immediately, right? So we call that zero-touch enrollment. That is the end result that we're trying to aim for the best when, or the most when it comes to our environment, right? So, we want it to be that you don't have to manually configure anything anymore. You take the device out, it knows that it's owned by your environment, and then it goes ahead and self-configures with everything that you need for it to be secure and ready to use for your end users, right? So essentially no more manual device management, right? In the event that you have to do that though, that you have devices which you didn't purchase from like a direct Apple vendor, or you don't have a bulk enrollment account from Apple. This happens sometimes, especially in smaller environments. You can still handle enrollment manually. You can scan a QR code on first time setup, and the device can be enrolled that way too. So we've got lots of different options on how to get these devices into here to make deploying those applications, getting that data security and everything taken care of, right? Really, really easy. So that is sort of the picture of it. So we're getting close to kind of the Q&A time here, and I see we actually have quite a few questions. Um, you know, we've got the ability to, also see at a glance kind of the big picture of where all our devices are, right? We've got the ability to see reports on nearly all of our data. And go through here and pull down anything that we want. So let me give you guys a better example of this too. If we're gathering any data, on these devices, we can see it. And that's not to say that we can see user data. That's one thing we actually can't see because we're trying to respect user privacy, right? We've got the ability, maybe I just want to see for all of my Android devices, do they have flash on their cameras, right? I can add that in over here, add any arguments that I want. Give it a name, and then run that report. And here we are. We can see all the different sensors on the cameras. So this Samsung SMG960U has 3 different camera sensors. One of them has a flash module. I can see that directly through here. Same thing with all of these, right? And I mean, it could be anything. What's the current battery status of the device? What's the overall RAM, right? When was the last time the device reported in? I can gather all of that info here, turn it into actionable data, click through to the devices, and start to take corrective action where it's necessary, right? So whether it's just getting big picture of what your environment is up to, or if it's just making corrective changes, to devices that have fallen out of line, we can do that all directly through here very easily. So some of the last stuff probably worth mentioning is just how easy we make this setup. When you first come in here, we will walk you through this kind of initial setup guide and welcome menu that just figures out exactly what it is you need to do. And then we also have, an infrastructure diagram that will help you get all of the supporting accounts and everything linked. All this stuff usually takes people less than an hour to kind of get, tackled. I know, if you have the hardware already and you don't have an MDM, a lot of this stuff can seem insurmountable. We've put a lot of effort into making sure that this is the easiest way to get started with MDM that's in the industry, right? We've also got, some integrations, some additional stuff that I won't break down in too much detail now, because I see we have quite a few questions to get to. Probably time to turn it over to Q&A. You think I covered everything we need to cover here, Kim? Anything that I left out?
Yes, and we can always go back if, depending on the questions, we can always go back and, show some features if we missed a few, but I think that was very comprehensive. Thank you so much, Chad.
My
Actually,
pleasure.
before we jump into the demo, we do have just 2 more poll questions that we'd love, to get to.
Sure.
So first, we want to mention that we have a trial experience. So if you like the demo today, you like what you've seen and what Chad has presented, you can get started immediately with LogMeIn Resolve MDM for free for 14
Yep.
days. So if you have no solution, or maybe you have an existing solution that you're not in love with and you'd love to, give ours a try, this is definitely a great opportunity to do so. So very simple. You can simply use the QR code on the screen. So we definitely encourage you to do that. And if you don't have the opportunity to do that right now, you can also visit logmein.com and try the experience for free under the mobile device management section of our website. But definitely use this QR code. It's definitely the simplest path to getting started with the trial. And so with that, we also have another option. So if you would prefer to receive a personalized demo of how MDM could work in your specific organization, just let us know using this poll, and we'll make sure that a product expert contacts you directly. So that is also an option that we offer if, the trial, 14-day free trial is not, maybe as palatable for you. So we'll just give a couple more seconds for folks to submit the responses. I do see that some are still trickling in. So let me maybe give another 5 seconds here.
For sure. It might be me that helps you if you say yes there. And if you don't like me, you can ask for someone else. And we'll make sure you get someone that you do like.
That's perfect. All right. So I think we can end the poll. Thank you so much. And with that, we are now into our Q&A. So, okay, perfect. Danny, I'll hand it over to you for that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much, Kim, for walking us through the informative beginning, and Chad for the demo of the year. I will have to find an award to send your way. So let's jump into the questions. As Chad said, we have tons of fabulous questions. I'm so excited to get started. Thank you guys for being so engaging and obviously listening throughout this great presentation and coming up with more information that you'd like to understand. So without any further ado, I'm just going to jump into it, guys. And whoever wants to jump into it with a response, please do so. So how is the product different from other MDM solutions?
For sure. Each product has its own kind of strengths and weaknesses, right? And I don't want to mislead people and say that we have the most features on every platform, right? Each product has different focuses, right? So we're primarily interested in supporting in detail Android and iOS, though we have a strong Mac OS and Windows component. What I would say is probably, the strongest element for us is our UX and reliability, right? Frankly, we get a lot of business from competitors, from folks that are on competitors who are less than happy with either like the uptime of the tool that they're using or the ease of use, right? We've just tried to simplify everything and really kind of break it down to just the easiest possible version of it. That's where I feel like this is special. What good is it to have 500 features if 499 of them are inaccessible to you, right? We've worked to make everything easy to set up.
Awesome. Great. Next one is location tracking available on both Android and iOS?
Great question. So, yes, the answer is yes, definitively, but also there's a caveat. So, location tracking for Android is more powerful and requires less user consent. That's just the ugly way to say it. I'm sure if I had some additional help from marketing, we could massage that better. But the thing is, this is industry wide, right? So we provide as much as we can. What does that actually mean, though? So on Android, essentially, without any user interaction at all, I can push out a policy to an Android device that says, "Hey, every hour, check in and give me your location," and the device will just do it, right? So on iOS, the user or a technician has to physically go into the settings of the device and always allow that permission, right? The other option, if you want location tracking updates immediately on the device, is to use lost mode, which puts the device in a state that's sort of like Find My iPhone. It literally just puts a message on the screen and says this device is currently being tracked. So the reason for that difference, Apple just thinks that background location tracking is not something that they want to allow even on corporate-owned devices. It's important to their image of privacy. I think from a consumer kind of marketing perspective, how true it is, that's up to you to decide. Yeah, that's kind of the difference there. So the answer is yes, it's available on both. You can always access the data on both. One requires the device to be locked, and then it will notify the user. The other can gather the data in the background. And Android is the one that can gather the data in the background with no effort. Okay.
Awesome. No, thanks for diving in there. Okay, so the next one, can you expand on the reporting capabilities available on the platform?
Sure. There's a lot, right? So first of all, like all of this data that you're seeing here, like the top level device data, is exportable. But the reporting capabilities, I'll just be honest. I think that at some point this might get like critical eye turned to it from a UI perspective. But I mean, literally, what this is whatever. It's essentially access to the database that we have. So maybe I'm creating a report here. Like the default ones are: is the device online? What's the username? What's the device model? What's the software version, right? So I can remove that and just do username, device model, Or maybe we'll even get rid of username, right? And I can add or remove nearly anything that we pull into our UI, even stuff that we don't present. So um, what is it's hard to kind of drill this down because we have so many options. I mean, hey, what's the battery voltage and the battery charge level on all of my Android devices, for example? That can be included in here. Every sensor, every piece of hardware and software information, be it the last time the device logged in, that's all available in this tool. It really is extremely extensive. The downside that I'll say, if there is one, is just that it takes a little bit of time to parse all of this information and decide what you want to turn into an actionable report. Hopefully that's useful.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. What security measures does Resolve MDM offer to protect mobile devices and data?
That really all just comes down to that sort of core thing that I went over during the demo, which is just like restricting how the device is used in the first place, right? Making sure that the device use stays on task, and then past that, also making sure that if the device is compromised, lost, something along those lines, that you have as much accessibility to corrective action as possible, be that a device lock or a full wipe, right?
Perfect. Perfect. Tim asked, so this works on laptops, not just phones and
It
tablets.
does, yes. It does. There are some technical differences. So, for example, we don't do location tracking for laptops. Like that's just a limitation. But we do quite a bit. I mean, you can alter nearly anything for Windows. You can still wipe the devices. You can still deploy applications, et cetera, et cetera. That's all available directly through here.
Cool.
Sorry.
Kristen asked, aren't most mobile devices owned by the user? Why should the user want central management of their own devices?
Um, Sorry, I was coughing. Repeat the
No, I can
second half
repeat
of the question.
it.
I,
Yeah.
I really.
You are totally fine. Kristen asks, aren't most mobile devices owned by the user? Why should the user want central management of their own devices?
So the thing is, something that I didn't break down is actually we sort of offer two different enrollment methods, which is to say a BYOD method, which is less intrusive, and a full enrollment method, which is more intrusive. So the way that I always describe the difference is anytime I talked about what I would call a punitive action in the environment. So this is to say a change to the device that restricts somebody's functionality, denies them the ability to do something on the device. That's not something that you can do in a BYOD environment, right? If it's just me pulling my iPhone out of my pocket and enrolling in this, the things that you can offer are what I would call additive, right? So instead of the user having to say, "What the hell is a Wi-Fi password? Can somebody send me the Wi-Fi password? How do I log into my Outlook? What app do I use?" They can just scan a QR code and the phone will just know everything, right? So it's a convenience increase for them too, And if they are being entrusted with company data, the other part of this is like, this is tit for tat, right? Like, we have to, if we're going to put company email on your device, right, and you're going to hold valuable customer or personal information, then we need to be able to know that we can, for example, uninstall that app and remove that data as well. So it simplifies and standardizes their interaction with your environment, right? And it can be done in a way that still respects their ownership of their device. And even in a full company owned mode, I will really reiterate there's sometimes this misunderstanding with MDM. You can't see their text messages, their camera roll, any personal data that stays protected no matter what. I mean, and not in the way that we are just being, good custodians of it, but in the way that the API does not have access to it. So there's a lot of ways you can make the argument compelling that it's going to simplify things for them and still respect their environment.
Perfect. That was a great answer.
Thank you.
If I already have an MDM, how easy is it to migrate over? IBM, etc. We have over 150 devices.
Okay, yeah. 150 is not too killer, honestly. Though obviously it depends on your team and how much time you have. It's easier said than done always. But yeah, I mean, so look, the first question that I ask is, do you have your devices in a Samsung Knox environment or Apple Business Manager? Are they associated with a corporate kind of ownership structure, right? If they are, then you link that account to us, and then the device needs to be reinitialized, and it'll come up in our environment, right? So I want to be clear when I say reinitialize, it's a euphemism for wiping the device, right? So that's the most disruptive thing for most people. It's just the device has to be wiped, right? So if the device hasn't had great data hygiene, there's stuff in kind of personal folders and everything. There might have to be some corrective action to pull that data off, properly preserve it before the wipe is done. But essentially, switching MDMs requires a device wipe and the accounts to be linked across both. As far as how hard that is, that depends on your personal environment. A lot of people who are already in motion, this is a project that can take a couple hours of work for a week or two, is usually what I would see.
Awesome. Perfect. Just grabbing another question here. We have a few more minutes left, tons more questions to get through. So this is a great problem to have. We'll get through as many as possible, I promise. Does the solution offer controls for corporate data protection, such as data loss prevention mechanisms?
Yeah, so that's all, going back to the wiping stuff that I talked about earlier. Also, the configurations of actual applications, you can instruct them to not store data on the devices. So yes, there's plenty. Depends on the app, depends on the data you're talking about, how it gets on there. So that's something we could explore more during like a demo conversation or something individually, if this is something people need more info on.
Awesome. And this looks like it could be maybe a straightforward answer. We can use the same number in several devices and still track all of them.
Yes.
Perfect. Grabbing another one. Let's see here. How easy is it for users to remove the MDM profile from the device?
If the device is properly enrolled with like an Apple Business Manager account, it's impossible. If it is done by hand, which I want to be very clear, this is usually an edge case, it is technically possible. I've never seen it happen by accident. And I've honestly actually never seen it happen deliberately, though it's technically possible. So very, very, very hard is my short response to that.
Awesome. Do you support fully managed? Do you support fully managed as well as work profile managed?
Yes, so
Okay.
here we go. I will jump to enrollment. Work profile. So if you want to have a separate work profile for users, there you go. Fully managed as well.
Perfect. Gosh, now you're answering the questions too fast for me. Okay. No, here we go. Let's say we as a business would like to add 10 iOS devices, iPads, to our
Sure.
environment. How do we start? Do we purchase those from a retail channel like a consumer would?
You could, yeah. The thing that I usually recommend is you specify that you're a business, of some type, and they'll hook you up with an Apple Business Manager account, usually, right? Which makes importing those devices easier. Then all you got to do is log in with that account in our platform. The devices come online. Um, Pretty much every major vendor I know of, even consumer-facing ones, can do this if you ask.
Awesome. If we issue a wipe command to a lost or offline device, can it be disabled or stopped by the finder when the device connects back online?
It would be extremely difficult, right? Um, Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, it's technically possible. Like if they throw it in a Faraday bag and no signal can get in to issue the wipe command, like technically possible. Um, Highly unlikely. Most people doing this would not be aware of these protocols.
Makes sense. Okay, we have, I'll take a couple more questions and then we will start to wrap up so we can honor the time frame that was given to everyone. So the next one I have here is, can a single device have multiple configurations applied?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can have 100 if you need.
Awesome. And let's see here. You got a lot of great presentations, Chad. So a lot of accolades from our audience. Thank you guys for all of the positive comments. Let's see. And someone also said, "Hope you feel better, Chad." So it was very nice, Amanda. Thank you. Is Mac OS devices unable to be enrolled in what was formerly known as GoTo Resolve and is now LogMeIn Resolve?
I'm sorry, repeat that last part.
Is Mac OS devices on is Mac OS devices unable to be enrolled in LogMeIn Resolve?
Oh no, they can be enrolled for sure. Yes, we've got decent controls for those platforms.
Perfect. Okay, I think that leaves us in a good spot. Any of these questions, guys, that we haven't gotten back to you or haven't answered live, we will get back to you after this webinar. We have them all tracked, so we will get someone to reach out to you to get a personal response to all of these great questions. Thank you guys so much for joining and being here. I'm just going to pull my screen back up before you all drop. Just wanted to share with you another opportunity to join us for some amazing webinars we have lined up. So, two QR codes that you'll see here at the top of your screen: Scale Your MSP, Automated Patch Management, and The Future of IT, A Guide to Leveraging AI for Success. If you want to go ahead and get a jump start on registering, feel free to go ahead and scan those QR codes. We would love to have you guys join us again for another amazing session. And thank you so much for being here, Chad. Thanks for being a trooper and working through your cold. It's just that time of year. So you still killed it. And thank you, Kim, for being here as well. Awesome presentation from you both. And we hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day.
All right, thank
Have a good
you.
one, folks. Thanks for hanging in there.